Is math a science or a religion? This is a question that Calvin and Hobbes ask in a comic strip, which you will see up here in a moment. In case you can't read it, it says, Calvin, you know, I don't think math is a science. I think it's a religion. And Hobbes says, a religion? Calvin, yeah, all these equations are like miracles. You take two numbers and you add them and they magically become one new number. No one can say how it happens. You either believe it or you don't. This whole book is full of things that have to be accepted on faith. It's a religion. And Hobbes says, in public schools no less, call a lawyer. And Calvin says, as a math atheist, I should be excused from this. I got a chuckle out of it too. And my math teacher wife's response to this cartoon when I showed it to her was, well, if students are going to pray in any class, it's probably a math class. Please, God, don't let her call on me. So this Calvin and Hobbes comic raises a perennial question. Science or religion? Science versus religion. So often, in both scientific and religious history, the fields were seen as being in opposition to one another, with science as an explanation of reality, and faith as a belief in something beyond our knowing. If reality can't be explained by scientific principles, then it must be a matter of faith. If math equations are miracles, then surely they should be removed from public schools. It's not quite that simple, though. The On Being interview from which we draw wisdom this week is a conversation between Krista Tippett and John Polkinghorne, a mathematical physicist and theologian, who applies what he knows about physics to think about how the world works and how God works in the world. He says that we need the insights of both science and religion together to interpret this complex and wonder-filled universe of which we are a part. We need to look closely at the parts, the bits, and the pieces, but also at the whole. As an example, he talks about how an art lover and a chemist, though these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, might approach a beautiful painting. The chemist could take the painting and analyze every little scrap of paint on the canvas and tell us about its chemical composition. But such an analysis would miss the point of the painting. An art lover steps back from the painting and looks at the whole, how the colors and the textures are interacting as part of that whole. His point is that we need both of these ways of looking at our multi-layered world. Polkinghorne has written several books, including one entitled Quarks, Chaos, and Christianity. Quarks are a basic building block of all matter, but according to him, they are also an article of faith. Polkinghorne says, well, quarks are in some sense unseen realities. Nobody has ever isolated a single quark in a lab, so we believe in them not because we've, even with sophisticated instruments, so to speak, seen them, but because assuming that they are there makes sense of great swaths of physical experience. As he points out, faith is not necessarily about things unknown, but rather things unseen. No one has ever seen a quark, but we know that they are there because of our physical experience. Much like people have a deep knowing or faith that there is something at work in the universe that is larger than us. This something is a part of all creation and makes beauty possible, and this something is a force for goodness and love and a source of grace. Many people call this something God. While not all people who embrace science also believe in God, Polkinghorne talks very compellingly about why he does. His faith is supported by what he knows as a result of science, and his passion for scientific inquiry is fueled by his faith. For a long time in the history of human thought, before Newton and Darwin came on the scene, the things that we could see and explain were considered science, and the gaps in our knowledge were filled with God. That is what Polkinghorne refers to as the God of the gaps theology in the interview excerpt that Chuck read earlier. This theology makes God the cosmic stunt artist who does the difficult things and the obscure bits and leaves nature to do the rest. The problem with this theology, as scientist Paul Davies points out, is that as we advance in our scientific knowledge, God becomes redundant and fades away like, as he says, the Cheshire Cat character in the Alice in Wonderland. As Unitarian Universalists, the first of our 6 sources, which you can find in the gray hymnal, is direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. That is one of the sources of our faith. And what this means for us is that our experience informs our understanding of the world and our faith. There's not a realm of knowing and then a realm of faith. Our faith is rooted in the experiences that we know. Theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote in a 1944 letter to a friend, "We are to find God in what we know, not in what we don't know. God must be recognized at the center of life, not when we are at the end of our resources." And that, in a nutshell, is the challenge of living a religious life. Not only grasping for God or meaning when times are desperate, but seeking them also in the center of life and in all that we do. This kind of life is surprising, it is full of wonder, and it ultimately helps us feel more at home in the universe. I love the words of Brian Swimme, an evolutionary cosmologist, on this topic. He says, "Our universe is a universe of surprise. We put our confidence not in our human egos, but in the power that gathered the stars and knit the first living cells together. Remember that you are here through the creativity of others," he says. "You have awakened in a great epic of being, a drama that is 15 to 20 billion years in the making. The intelligence that ignited the first minds, the care that spaced the notes of the nightingale, the power that heaved all 100 billion galaxies across the sky now awakens as you, too, and permeates your life no less thoroughly." Polkinghorne would agree with him, pointing out that the scripture from so many different religious traditions that we have about the nature of God and the scientific insights that we have about the process and evolution of the world are consonant with each other. They both suggest that we live in a world that is perpetually in the process of becoming, and that we are part of that movement. Polkinghorne is studying how this awareness of our place in the great epic of being is related to mathematical equations. Now, if you consider yourself a math atheist like Calvin does, what I'm about to say may seem a little odd, but philosophers and scientists have talked as having an element of beauty to them. Mathematical patterns occur throughout the fundamental laws of nature, and their beauty lies in the ability and the power they give us to more fully understand the physical world. Maybe this beauty, the beauty of patterns and of illuminated realities, is a reflection of God. Alfred North Whitehead, a founder of one of my favorite theological schools or approaches, process theology, wrote that God is the poet of the world, leading us with tender patience and a vision of truth, beauty, and goodness. I love the image of God as a poet of the world. But to understand it, we have to think about what poetry does to its readers or listeners. The words of a poem contain more than immediately meets the eye, and they evoke something in us. Think of poetry you've read or heard, the poem earlier today. The words are few, but they are packed with meaning. God as poet evokes something in us and leaves room for our experience. I think that perhaps one of the most important motivating forces for both scientists, such as Polkinghorne, and for people of faith is beauty. It leads scientists down paths that bring new, surprising discoveries, and it leads people of faith more deeply into knowing the world and knowing God. Have you ever seen something so beautiful in nature that it stopped you in your tracks right there? I know there's a certain flower that I first saw growing on a fence along a sidewalk in Berkeley, California. Its vibrant colors and this incredibly multi-dimensional and intricate shape had me peering closely at it, and of course pulling out my phone to take a picture. And I finally saw another one here in Texas just a month ago. The fact that this flower exists is a miracle to me. Just like Walt Whitman writes about in the poem that I read earlier. He says, "As to me, I know of nothing else but miracles." Whitman's writing was strongly influenced by the work of a Unitarian transcendentalist, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, Emerson shocked his community by proclaiming that Unitarians do in fact believe in miracles. Not the kind of miracles that are strange, inexplicable occurrences or phenomena that are difficult to reconcile with modern scientific knowledge, but miracles that take form in our natural world. We believe that life is a miracle. The solar system in which we live and the relationship of all the stars and the planets is a miracle. In Emerson's words, blowing clover and falling rain are miracles. And the fact that we are here is a miracle. Miracles make us wonder. And wonder inspires us to curiosity and a spirit of exploration that we could know more. And our experience of this can also give us faith in something larger at work in the world. Polkinghorne admits that while scientists don't use the word wonder very often in their academic writing, they use it a lot in conversation. It's also something that's inherently part of being a child, looking at the world with fresh eyes and a mind that yearns to know why. I know when I was younger, I was fascinated with biology, especially the heart and cells and the human genome. These were all things that I couldn't see, either because they were too small or they were underneath my skin. But I would make models or diagrams of them, sometimes for school projects and other times just to satisfy my curiosity. I remember turning my bedroom rug into a human heart, with all the atria, ventricles, and valves marked out with masking tape, and driving a little matchbox car around inside it to simulate the flow of blood. The heart, the cell, and the human genome, all of these are at the heart of what it means to be a physical being in this world. And because of this, they are beautiful. We also know something of how they work thanks to the research of scientists. In retrospect, I think my early scientific explorations were part of my faith development. I believe that God is in the heart and the fibers of who we are. And it's through the human body, through relationships, and the inner workings of our natural world that I can discern the nature of God. For me, God is not in those gaps beyond our knowing, but in the fibers of life. God is a mystery beyond all our naming, for sure, as we say here each week. But God is also of cells and blood, dust and dirt, water and wind, plants, and all of life. Albert Einstein wrote that science can only ascertain what is, but not what should be. Science can help us understand the nature of our world and even the nature of God. But what does this call us to do and to be? I think it is beauty that leads us toward what should be. Beauty found in religion, in nature, in art, and in so many other places. What creates the most beautiful, good, and loving patterns of relatedness in the universe? That, I think, is where we are called to be as people of faith. So follow beauty, friends. I wonder where it will lead you. Amen, and blessed be.